Arata Miyabi, a transfer student starting at a new school in Tokyo, Japan. Despite being a teenager, Arata possesses a strong sense of justice and cannot stand by when he witnesses injustice. This is put to the test when he witnesses a student in his class bullying another student, and no one steps in to intervene. The homeroom teacher even chooses to leave the classroom, as if in fear of the bully. However, he cannot stay silent and takes matters into his own hands by confronting the bully and delivering a strong punch, hoping it will serve as a lesson not to bully others again. Arata soon discovers the reason behind the other students' and teachers' reluctance to intervene in the bullying. Ryuga Nagaya, the bully, is the son of the powerful Shigeru Nagaya, the head of Nagaya Holdings, Japan's largest restaurant franchise. The students and teachers fear the repercussions of crossing the powerful Nagaya family. After Arata's confrontation with Ryuga, he reports the incident to his father, Shigeru, who comes to the school in a rage. He demands that the school expel Arata for his actions. He even offers to forgive Arata if he apologizes and bows down to his son, but he refuses, standing by his principles of upholding justice. Arata's father, Shinji, who is also summoned to the school, is moved by his son's determination. To support him, he resigned from his position as manager at Nagaya Holdings, where he had worked for 20 years. This leads to Arata's expulsion from school on his first day. Despite this setback, Shinji is proud of his son for standing up for what is right and is not discouraged. He decides to use his savings to open a restaurant to continue their lives. A few days later, Arata couldn't shake the guilt as he walked through the city streets, remembering the fateful day when he ignored Yuka's warning and crossed paths with the notorious Ryuga. When he ran into Yuka on her way to a university entrance interview, he saw it as a sign to make an apology. He offered to show her a shortcut to the university, hoping to make up for his past mistake. With time running out, they managed to arrive at the university just in time for her interview. Arata waited anxiously at the entrance for her to finish, eager to hear how it went. When she emerged, he was relieved to see her smiling and filled with excitement. As they walked home together, their conversation flowed easily, and he realized that she was much more than the person he had initially thought. She was kind, ambitious, and independent, and he couldn't help but feel drawn to her. He knew it would be hard to shake this feeling of admiration. As Arata and Yuka's relationship continues to grow, he invited her to taste the food at his newly opened restaurant, a dream he had shared with his father. But that dream was abruptly shattered when Shinji was tragically killed in a hit-and-run accident. Devastated and alone, Arata struggled to cope with the loss of his only family. After noticing his distress, Yuka made it her mission to be there for him, reminding him to take care of himself and offering her support. When a detective named Matsushita came to inform Arata that the case had been closed with the culprit compensating the victim's family, he was filled with anger and despair. But things turned for the worse when Yuka stumbled upon pictures of the car involved in the accident, recognizing it as belonging to the notorious Ryuga. Fueled by his desire for revenge, Arata stormed to Ryuga's residence, determined to make him pay for his father's death. But before he could carry out his plan, Yuka contacted the police, and they arrived just in time to stop him from committing a crime. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Arata was left to grapple with his grief, anger, and the injustice of the situation. But with Yuka by his side, he knew he would not have to face it alone. In the end, Arata found himself behind bars, paying the price for his actions against Ryuga. Shigeru, the powerful patriarch of Nagaya Holdings, visited him in prison, offering to secure his release if he would only apologize to Ryuga. But Arata refused to back down, unwilling to give in to the demands of a guilty man. Desperate to keep Arata locked up, Shigeru turned to Yuka, offering her a prestigious college scholarship in exchange for changing her testimony at the trial and covering up Ryuga's involvement in Shinji's death. Despite her initial reluctance, Yuka ultimately accepted the offer. The deck was stacked against Arata, as even the police chief had been swayed by Shigeru's influence, ordering the case to be closed without bringing Ryuga to justice. As a result, Arata was sentenced to 3 years in prison, where he faced harsh treatment from his fellow inmates, as he refused to submit to their authority. A few weeks after her college orientation, Yuka visited Arata in prison. She apologized for her actions that led to his imprisonment, and explained the circumstances surrounding her acceptance of the scholarship from Nagaya Holdings. But he was not resentful. Instead, he thanked her for her actions that prevented him from committing a terrible crime. He had come to terms with his time in prison, and had even used the time to study the history of Nagaya Holdings, the company that had played a significant role in his downfall. Arata shared with Yuka his plans to open a restaurant after his release and to rival Nagaya Holdings. It was a lofty goal, but he was determined to make it happen. 3 years later, Arata was free, ready to put his plans into action. He had spent his time in prison, studying everything about the restaurant industry. He had identified the bustling entertainment district of Roppongi as the perfect location for his venture. He knew that the competition would be fierce, with Nagaya Holdings already having a presence in the area, but he was determined to succeed. Coincidentally, the summer festival took place in Roppongi shortly after Arata's release. He took the opportunity to explore the area and enjoy the festive atmosphere. It was during this time that he ran into Yuka again. During their reunion, Yuka informed Arata of her graduation and her current position at Nagaya Holdings, the company responsible for his father's death and his downfall. Hearing that, Arata was shocked by the news, but his feelings for her remained unchanged. He shared with her his dream of opening a restaurant in Roppongi and rivaling Nagaya Holdings. But before he could make that happen, he needed to raise the capital and started by working on a fishing boat for a few years. He also admits his love for Yuka and tells her that he will propose to her when he is financially stable. With heavy hearts, they parted ways again. 7 years later, the scene shifts to a school where a group of students is bullying their classmates. One of the victims, Aoiya Samiya, takes matters into her own hands by live streaming the incident on her social media account, which has a large following. This leads to a confrontation with the bully's parents, one of whom physically assaults her. At that time, Arata happened to be nearby and intervened, breaking up the fight. It turns out that Arata has returned to Roppongi, having raised enough capital to open his restaurant, Mayabi II. He hires 2 of his acquaintances from prison, Ryuta and Riku, as staff. However, despite their initial optimism, the restaurant struggles to attract customers. He decided to promote the restaurant by distributing flyers on the streets. But unfortunately, Arata's efforts to distribute flyers resulted in an accident when he was hit by Aoi's motorcycle, leaving him hospitalized. However, the accident also allowed them to talk about his restaurant, and Aoi suggested that he promote it through social media instead of traditional methods like flyers. Meanwhile, Yuka has been promoted to manager of a Nagaya Holdings restaurant in Roppongi, where she faces daily challenges, such as dealing with underage customers trying to order alcohol. One evening, Aoi and her friends, who were underage, attempted to trick Yuka into serving them alcohol but failed. They decided to try their luck at Arata's restaurant, Mayabi II, and obtained alcohol with fake IDs. Eventually, Yuka happens to run into Arata on the street, and they catch up while walking. They end up in front of Mayabi II, where she sees Aoi and her friends drinking in the restaurant. Soon after, the police arrive at the restaurant, responding to reports of alcohol being served to minors. Arata suspects that Yuka was the one who reported them to the police. In the end, Arata, Ryuta, and the teenagers were taken in for questioning, and the restaurant was closed for 3 months as punishment for their negligence. However, they protested the decision, arguing that it would bankrupt their business. After all, they still had to pay the rent for the building while the restaurant was closed, and they couldn't do it without income. At that moment, Arata thinks he could have avoided the punishment. One of Aoi's friends, Ryuji, is Ryuga's younger brother. When he finds out that Ryuji is at the police station with Arata, he immediately asks Arata to kneel and apologize. There, Ryuga promised to intervene and have the punishment lifted in exchange for his apology. The police feared Ryuga's family and would do as he said. But Arata refused. He would not kneel to the person who had ruined his life and caused his father's death. The incident deeply impacted Ryuta, who blamed himself for being tricked by a group of teenagers and causing problems for Arata, despite his promise to help him. In the past, Ryuta was a lost soul, wandering aimlessly as a gang member. He had no sense of purpose or guiding principles, but that all changed when he met Arata. He realized that he also wanted more from life, and decided to leave the gang and work for Arata to help make his dream a reality. However, things turned for the worse when Ryuta made a mistake that resulted in the restaurant's closure. Arata was at a loss and chose to drown his sorrows in alcohol with Yuka at a local bar. At that time, he stumbled upon Aoi, who was pursued by a dangerous stalker. Without hesitation, he intervened, striking the man and leading her and Yuka to safety. As a token of gratitude for his assistance, she offered to help promote his restaurant on her social media and blog. The three of them met at a cafe to discuss the promotion plan, but things took a turn for the awkward when Arata went to order food. At that moment, Aoi and Yuka both realized that they had feelings for him, and both believed that they were the ones who would win his affection. Tensions rose even further when Aoi accused Yuka, being the one who had reported her drinking at Arata's restaurant, to the police. She felt betrayed by Yuka, despite her claims of love for Arata. Seeing this as a prime opportunity, Aoi shared her suspicions about Yuka with Arata. To her surprise, Arata chose to forgive her, understanding that she had her reasons for reporting the incident to the police. With Yuka leaving, Arata and Aoi turned their attention to their future collaboration. During the discussion, she pointed out that the interior of Miyabi II was unappealing, which was a major reason why the restaurant struggled to attract customers. She suggested he redecorating the restaurant to make it more visually appealing and comfortable. She then proposed to promote the restaurant effectively through various channels. However, Arata did not immediately respond to her suggestion. Instead, he continued drinking until he became drunk and began telling her about his personal struggles. Her sympathy for him grew, and she became determined to help him achieve his dreams. The following day, Aoi met with Arata at his restaurant and asked him to hire her as an employee. It turned out that she came from a wealthy family, and her mother expected her to take over the family business, but she had decided to abandon those plans, and even forgot college to assist him. She believed that with her help, he had the potential to become an exceptional person. It turned out that Aoi was not the only one looking to work for Arata. Ryuji had also decided to apply for a job at Miyabi II for financial reasons and repay him for an incident involving the police. Ryuji was from a wealthy family, but his father had not chosen him as his successor. With the help of Aoi and Ryuji, Arata began redesigning his restaurant. At that time, she convinced him to make her the manager, and she shared her plans for growing the restaurant. He trusted her completely and allowed her to create a new interior design for the restaurant. After several weeks of hard work, the team finally completed the redesign of Miyabi II, transforming the restaurant into something completely different. Aoi also began promoting the restaurant on social media, which sparked great interest among potential customers. On the first night of the reopening, the restaurant was flooded with curious customers, overwhelming Arata and his team, who were not yet used to serving such a high volume of customers. Despite the challenges, they were grateful for the success of the first night and the satisfying profit it brought. Then Aoi reminded them not to get too complacent, as this was just the beginning, and they still had work to do to maintain a steady flow of customers. To their relief, the following week, the restaurant remained full of customers, although the turnover was still unstable. Nevertheless, the team celebrated their success by having a night out at a nightclub. During this outing, Riku, the chef, revealed to them that he was transgender. While initially taken aback, the team accepted his choice without much difficulty. In the meantime, Shigeru had heard of Miyabi II's newfound success and was troubled by it. After all, Nagaya Holdings had started as a small restaurant, and if left unchecked, Miyabi II could potentially grow to rival Nagaya Holdings. Then Shigeru tasked Yuka with taking control of the businesses surrounding Miyabi II, in hopes of slowly destroying the restaurant. However, before Yuka could put Shigeru's plan into action, Arata's restaurant began to experience a decline in profits. This was because the quality of the food Riku was preparing had dropped for unknown reasons. As Riku lacked formal culinary training, Aoi suggested that Arata consider finding a replacement with more culinary experience. But he rejected the idea, fully confident in her cooking abilities. He remembered the delicious bento she used to make for him while they were in prison. Instead of firing her, Arata doubled her salary to motivate her to improve her cooking. The next day, Arata asked Aoi to evaluate Riku's cooking objectively and help her find the right recipe for her dishes. At first, she believed that Riku's cooking was still lacking, but with her guidance and feedback, Riku began to learn from her mistakes and improve the quality of her cooking. Eventually, she acknowledged Riku's dishes and made one of them a special menu item at the restaurant. A few days later, Aoi and Ryuji ran into their former high school classmates, the bullies whose videos she had shared on social media. It turned out that they still held a grudge against her, as her actions had led to their expulsion from school. They even admitted to reporting her to the police when she was drinking at Arata's restaurant. Enraged, she physically assaulted them, ensuring they would not dare to cause trouble for her again. However, now that she knew the truth, Aoi felt guilty for falsely accusing Yuka. Meanwhile, Yuka also felt guilty for her actions towards Arata. Despite her betrayals, he still loved her, making her angry with herself for not deserving him. She began drinking at a bar to forget her guilt toward him. But after leaving the bar, she stumbled upon Arata and his friends. Under alcohol, she approached him, asking why he never hated her despite her betrayals. To her surprise, Arata answered her question simply. He understood that Yuka was only following orders from Shigeru, and had no choice but to do what she was told, even if it meant destroying his restaurant. He empathized with the difficulties she faced in her job. After sharing his thoughts, Arata invited Yuka and his friends for dinner at a cafe. There, he announced his plans to open a franchise of his restaurant. Arata was not concerned about her sharing this information with Shigeru and Ryuga, showing that he had the plan to deal with them. As expected, Yuka immediately reported Arata's plans to Shigeru, who instructed her to continue spying on him and his restaurant. However, little did they know that Shigeru's secretary was a spy, sent by Aikawa, one of the directors of Nagaya Holdings. The secretary informed her of the conversation. In the meantime, Aoi decided to move out of her family home, as her mother continued to disapprove of her job at the restaurant. Her mother wanted her to attend college and take over the family business, but Aoi knew that she could not convince her mother to change her mind. Before leaving, she promised her mother that she would help the small restaurant grow into the largest restaurant franchise in the country. True to her word, as time went by, Miyabi II continued to thrive and even received offers from TV station to participate in cooking competitions between restaurants. However, Ryuga once again tried to ruin Arata's newfound success by revealing his criminal past to the producers of the competition, resulting in the offer being withdrawn as the TV station did not want to be associated with an ex-convict. Feeling guilty, Aoi decided to tell Arata the truth about who reported her to the police. Upon hearing this, he apologized to Yuka for falsely accusing her and promised to realize his dream of becoming a successful person, with the ultimate goal of destroying Nagaya Holdings and freeing her from the company so they could be together and live happily. Arata had a plan to achieve his goal. He had partnered with an investment advisor named Yudai, who was the student he had saved from being bullied by Ryuga in high school. While Arata was in prison, Yudai visited him and promised to help him take down Nagaya Holdings. With Yudai's help, Arata invested 800 million yen in Nagaya Holdings shares. Shigeru was shocked to learn that Arata had become one of the largest shareholders in Nagaya Holdings, and he confronted him at Miyabi II. He also demanded that Ryuji, his second child, resign from his job as a waiter at the restaurant. Despite Shigeru's rudeness, Arata still served him as a customer and provided him with the food he ordered. However, after Shigeru insulted the food, Arata snapped and reminded him of his goal to destroy Nagaya Holdings, and he should be prepared for that moment. It turned out that Arata had always worked closely with Yudai, but little did he know that he had another ally in his quest for power, Aikawa. A former colleague of Arata's father, Aikawa shared Arata's ambition of becoming the chairman of Nagaya Holdings, and was willing to work with him to achieve it. However, Arata and Yudai soon realized their path to power would not be easy. Despite their efforts, many shareholders still supported the current chairman, Shigeru. Arata's financial resources were also limited, and he could not increase his shareholding in Nagaya Holdings. Despite these obstacles, Arata refused to give up on his goal. He devised new plans and strategies to deal with Shigeru, determined to claim his rightful place as the chairman of Nagaya Holdings. As Shigeru learned of Aikawa's betrayal, his trust in her began to waver. Once he had considered her a mentor and a potential successor, but now he was unsure of her loyalty. His thoughts were soon interrupted by the news of Ryuga's latest trouble, that he had caused a stir by disqualifying Arata and his restaurant from a cooking competition on television. Shigeru saw this as an opportunity to publicly humiliate Arata and destroy his restaurant, believing that there was no way his small establishment could compete with Nagaya Holdings' restaurant. As Ryuga left his father's room, feeling ashamed and guilty, he was surprised to find his brother, Ryuji, waiting outside the door. He feared that Shigeru would replace him as successor and appoint Ryuji instead. However, his arrival was not to discuss succession. Then Shigeru called him and asked him to stop working for Arata and return to his studies in Europe. But Ryuji refused, arguing that he felt more at home and had found true friends and family at Arata's restaurant. As the second child of the Nagaya family, he had always felt overshadowed by Ryuga and had never felt like a true part of the family. That's why he decided to run away from home and work for Arata, even though he knew it would prevent him from getting a position at Nagaya Holdings. There was another reason why Ryuji chose to stay working for Arata. He had fallen in love with Aoi. However, she realized that Ryuji liked her, and one day, she put forward a condition for him to get her as a girlfriend. He must take over the chairman position at Nagaya Holdings. Hearing that, Ryuji was willing to do whatever it took to win her heart and prove himself worthy to his family. A few days later, Arata and Aoi journeyed to a rural area to meet a food supplier for their restaurant. It was there that they discovered that the supplier was none other than Matsushita, a former detective, who had been in charge of investigating the hit-and-run case of his father. The guilt of not being able to solve the case weighed heavily on him, and he apologized to Arata for his failure. He offered to pay him whatever he wanted to make up for his mistakes, particularly for giving false testimony. But Arata refused the offer. All he wanted was for Matsushita to tell the truth about what happened to his father in the past. As soon as he returned from Matsushita's house, Arata faced another problem. Shigeru was up to his old tricks, this time buying the building he was renting. And to make matters worse, Shigeru planned to tear down the building, claiming it was old and in disrepair. Knowing that, Arata and his team had to quickly find a new location for their restaurant. The news of Shigeru's actions left Ryuji confused and wondering why his father would throw money into buying a building only to tear it down later. He knew nothing of the history and the enmity between them. Seeing Ryuji's confusion, Aoi decided to tell him the whole story of what Shigeru had done to Arata in the past. After learning of his father's actions, Ryuji feels guilty about Arata and decides to help him by resigning from his restaurant and attempting to take over Nagaya Holdings to convince his father to leave Arata alone. The next day, Arata confronted Shigeru at his office to ask for an explanation about the building purchase. Shigeru explained that he had deliberately bought the building to limit his freedom. He planned to continue buying every building Arata rented for his restaurant in the future to force him keep moving and prevent him from getting his revenge. He was willing to waste much money to ensure Arata's defeat. However, Shigeru promised that he would not bother Arata again if he apologized and kneel before him. But for the fourth time Arata refused. He would not bow down to an enemy he was determined to defeat. After Arata left, Yuka entered the room and tried to persuade Shigeru to abandon his plans, reminding him that buying old buildings would not profit the company. also telling him that he was allowing his emotions to guide his decisions, which was not wise for a leader to do. The conflict also affected Miyabi II, when Ryuji revealed his plan to take over Nagaya Holdings and stop Shigeru's harassment of Arata. Then Aoi approved his plan and also helped him explain it to the other employees. However, Arata responded angrily, calling Aoi unfit to be a manager for sacrificing one of the employees. He considered all employees as his family, and they should not have to sacrifice themselves for his sake. After much hesitation, Aoi ultimately decides to follow Arata's lead. He reveals to her and the rest of the team that he intends to purchase a building, so Shigeru couldn't force them to move their restaurant. Hearing that, the team is taken aback by this plan, as they believe Arata lacks the funds to buy a building. Despite their doubts, he manages to secure the necessary funds in time. This is largely thanks to a live broadcast Aoi and Ryuji organized to promote the food at Miyabi II. The broadcast attracts thousands of viewers, many eager to try the restaurant's offerings. As a result, their business becomes popular, and he reinstates Aoi as the restaurant manager. Months pass and Arata successfully purchases a building for the restaurant, much to Shigeru's surprise. He begins to plot his next move, considering ways to sabotage Arata's success. One such idea is to try and recruit Aoi to his side. She initially shows little interest in the offer, only asking him to contact her again later. As Arata and the team decorate their new restaurant, an old woman approaches them. She informs them that they have made a grave mistake by opening a restaurant in that location and predicts they will soon go bankrupt. Despite the old woman's ominous warning, Arata chooses not to dwell on her words. Instead, he turns his attention to naming his new company. After much discussion and debate among his employees, he ultimately settled on the name Roppongi Class Co. Limited, as suggested by Ryuta. Then Aoi suggests abbreviating the name to RC for simplicity's sake. Their restaurant's social media account has become increasingly popular among young investors, thanks to her diligent promotion efforts. Meanwhile, Shigeru receives a report from his assistant regarding Matsushita, the food ingredients supplier for Miyabi II restaurant. Strangely, he only supplies Arata with no other restaurant will accept his supplies. Several days after the restaurant opens in its new location, Arata and his team finally understand the old woman's words. The area is rarely traversed by people, so many shops and cafes around there are closed. The old woman had warned they would suffer the same fate if they didn't move. Determined not to give up so easily, Arata sets out to revitalize the area. He works to fix and redecorate the nearby restaurants and shops, hoping that this will convince their owners to reopen. His efforts prove successful. Shortly after, the area is bustling with customers again. Meanwhile, at Nagaya Holdings, Shigeru meets with Matsushita and tries to persuade him to stop supplying Miyabi II. Instead, he offers Matsushita a partnership with Nagaya Holdings, promising him a higher price for his goods. However, Matsushita rejects the offer, citing his debt to Arata and his father. He even reveals to Shigeru that he is the detective in charge of the hit-and-run case involving Arata's father. Determined to defeat Arata and his team, Nagaya Holdings continues to pursue Aoi as a potential ally. Ryuga makes an enticing offer, promising her a salary of 20 million yen per year. Unbeknownst to him, she only feigns acceptance to gather information. Aoi takes advantage of Ryuga's trust by getting him to reveal details about the hit-and-run incident that killed Arata's father. She secretly records their conversation, catching Ryuga's admission of guilt. When he realizes what she has done, he chases after her in an attempt to retrieve the recording. Luckily, Arata comes to Aoi's rescue and almost beats Ryuga when he sees her hurt. The altercation is only resolved when the police arrive and arrest Ryuga. After sending the audio recording evidence to the media, Aoi and her team's efforts was success, as Ryuga's possible involvement in the hit-and-run case that killed Arata's father is widely reported. Furious at Ryuga's actions, Shigeru orders him to focus on recruiting Aoi and keeping his past crimes under wraps. As the scandal unfolds, Aikawa sees an opportunity to advance her ambitions. Then Arata, Aoi, Yudai, and Aikawa meet to discuss plans to overthrow Shigeru and take the position of chairman of Nagaya Holdings. They realize they must fulfill two conditions to succeed: file a lawsuit to have Ryuga imprisoned for his crimes, and gauge Shigeru's loyalty to his company versus his son. If Shigeru stands by Ryuga, investors will likely withdraw their support, and shares in Nagaya Holdings will plummet. But if he prioritizes the company over his son, investors will likely remain loyal. To ensure their plan's success, Aikawa and her team must make sure Shigeru chooses the company over his son, making it easier for her to take over as chairman. A few days later, Aikawa's suspicions are confirmed when her spies hear that Shigeru has chosen to keep Ryuga as his successor, despite Yuka's pleas to support his imprisonment. Without hesitation, she gathers the company's top executives to discuss removing Shigeru as chairman. As Ryuga's trial approaches, Shigeru tries to comfort his son, promising to support him through the trial and vowing not to abandon his family. However, at the press conference before the trial, he makes a shocking statement, publicly admitting that Ryuga is guilty of the hit and run and is willing to see him punished for his crime. This revelation catches Arata and his team off guard, and their plans to remove Shigeru as chairman are thwarted. The company's shareholders reject Aikawa's demands, as they believe Shigeru prioritizes the company's interests above those of his family. Feeling betrayed by his father, Ryuga flees the courthouse and confronts Shigeru at the press conference, but he ignores him, leaving him no choice but to publicly confess his crime. At that time, Ryuga is ultimately sentenced to 6 years in prison for the death of Arata's father. But Arata's quest for justice is not yet over. He swears to make Shigeru pay for his actions. After Ryuga was thrown into prison, Ryuji knew he had to make a difficult decision. He realized that if he wanted to claim the successor position at Nagaya Holdings, he would have to leave his job at Miyabi II. The successor position at Nagaya Holding was currently vacant, as Ryuga's shares in the company had been taken over completely by Shigeru, who had revoked his as the successor. With a heavy heart, Ryuji handed in his resignation letter to Arata and set out to meet with Shigeru. To his surprise, Shigeru offered him a position at the company, even though he had been working for Nagaya's main rival. He explained that he still wanted a member of his family as his successor, and that he believed that Ryuji had the potential to lead Nagaya Holdings to new heights. Ryuji was thrilled by this opportunity, and he enthusiastically threw himself into his new role. Under Yuka guidance, he began to learn the ins and outs of management, and quickly proved himself to be a quick learner. Soon after, she trusted him enough to accompany her in guiding their chefs in a cooking competition. The competition was fierce, with many restaurants other than Nagaya participating. Miyabi II was one of them, and they were considered Nagaya's main rivals. In the first round alone, Riku beat many chefs from other restaurants, much to the delight of Ryuji and Yuka. Thanks to their victory in the cooking competition, Miyabi II was quickly becoming a hot commodity among foodies and investors. One of those investors was Kosuke, a well-known investor from Golden Earth Capital, who approached Arata with an offer to invest in the restaurant. At first, Arata was hesitant to make a decision, so he asked Kosuke for some time to consider the offer. Despite his initial reluctance, Arata began to see the potential for growth in his restaurant and was becoming more inclined to accept the investment offer. He had even begun making plans to open restaurant branches one by one, using the investment funds. However, Aoi had a different idea. She thought it would be more efficient to open multiple branches all at once, and Yudai agreed with her. After a day of deliberation, Arata finally decided to go with Aoi's idea, thinking that he should occasionally consider his team's suggestions. The next day, they met with Kosuke to discuss the investment offer. During the meeting, she suggested that Kosuke invest 300 million, but Arata felt they should have gotten more, so he asked Kosuke to give them 1 billion in funds. To everyone's surprise, Kosuke was willing to invest as much as he had requested, although the restaurant was still relatively small. News of Golden Earth's investment in Miyabi II quickly spread to other investors, and soon Arata had a total of 2 billion in investment funds. The joy that Arata and his team felt was only amplified when Miyabi II went on to win the next round of the cooking competition. However, the team's joy was tainted by the revelation that Yuka and Ryuji had tried to cheat by contacting the television staff to ask for a leak about the raw materials used in the match. Despite the revelation of Yuka and Ryuji's cheating, Arata invited them to an after-party to celebrate their victory in the cooking competition. During the party, they played a game of truth or dare, and Ryuji used the opportunity to probe Arata about his feelings for Aoi. When it was Arata's turn, Ryuji bombarded him with questions about Aoi, to which he replied that he only saw her as a sister and colleague, nothing more or less. His honesty made Aoi visibly upset, and she left the party without saying anything else. Noticing Aoi's distress, Riku urged Arata to go after her. When they met, Aoi finally confessed her feelings for him, revealing that she had loved him all along, and that everything she had done was to make him happy. However, Arata rejected her, explaining that their age difference was too great, and he did not want to cause her pain. Aoi was deeply hurt by Arata's rejection, and the next day, she asked for time off from work to process her emotions. But her troubles were far from over. While away, she received news that Kosuke had withdrawn his investment from Roppongi Class, and other investors had followed suit. This seriously blew Arata's restaurant franchise, as they had already used some investment funds to open new branches. Kosuke's sudden change was because of Shigeru had convinced him to break the contract with Arata. However, the franchise owners were not concerned with the reason. They were only concerned that their businesses were at risk without investment funds. Their Arata was forced to assure them that he would find a way to solve the problem. Meanwhile, Aoi felt guilty for her role in the crisis and decided to return early from her leave. She knew her suggestion to open multiple branches all at once had ultimately backfired on them. But Arata reassured her that he did not blame her. Instead, he was more determined than ever to get revenge on Shigeru. With this in mind, Arata and Aoi began searching again for potential investors. To their surprise, they discovered that one of the potential investors was someone they knew. It was an old lady who had once mocked their restaurant. It turns out that she was Hiroko Tanabe, a big name in the real estate industry. Without hesitation, Arata and Aoi arranged a meeting with Hiroko to discuss her investment in Roppongi Class. However, during the meeting, he discovered that Hiroko had invested in Nagaya Holdings, which was owned by his enemy, Shigeru. Then Arata refused to accept help from someone who had a good relationship with his enemy, and his harsh words offended Hiroko, who left the meeting in anger. But later that night, Arata realized his mistake. He was too focused on getting revenge and had forgotten about the people who were depending on him. He knew he had to put his personal feelings aside and do what was best for his team and business. So, he called Hiroko and begged her to invest in his company. To his relief, she was willing to invest in him, remembering his kindness, especially when he had helped repair other restaurants and revive the quiet entertainment area. The scene then shifts to Shigeru, who asks Ryuji to lead the team in the final round of the cooking competition. Perhaps feeling the pressure of the responsibility, Ryuji chose to use underhanded means to bring down the opposing team. He contacted a reporter and revealed that Riku, the head chef from Miyabi II, was transgender. Then Ryuji asked the reporter to write an article about it and distribute it to the public. The article quickly became a hot topic among the public, and Riku was embarrassed, especially since her parents still didn't know about it. This caused her to lose her passion for the competition, and Arata had to take her place. But Aoi, who was determined to support her friend, was able to revive Riku's spirits by calling her. Then Riku decided to participate in the competition, took over the chef role from Arata, and even announced in front of the camera that she was transgender and was not ashamed of it. Her boldness paid off as the judges declared Miyabi II as the winner of the competition. But Ryuji's actions had serious consequences. Shigeru scolded him for his actions, and Aoi was disappointed in him. She didn't care about his ambition to take over Nagaya Holdings. What she couldn't forgive was that he had attacked Riku, who was his friend. Despite the setback, Ryuji didn't give up on his ambition to control the company, believing it was the only way to win Aoi's forgiveness. Meanwhile, Ryuga learned that Shigeru had appointed Ryuji as his successor, which filled him with anger. He used that anger to motivate himself to train diligently while in prison, determined to become stronger. 4 years passed quickly, and Arata achieved one of his goals by becoming a wealthy man. Roppongi Class had grown into a large corporation, and his close friends had been appointed managers. But he still had one ambition to achieve: to take revenge on Shigeru. In those 4 years, Ryuji had also thrived, proving himself capable of taking over as chairman of Nagaya Holdings. He had successfully managed the company's U.S. branch, earning him a reputation among the top brass. However, Shigeru's health had begun to deteriorate due to his age. He was frequently falling ill and could no longer fully manage the company. Eventually, he had to be hospitalized as his pancreatic cancer had begun to spread. The doctor predicted that he would only survive for 6 months. During this time, Ryuga was released from prison, and his first move was to visit Shigeru in the hospital, where he vented his anger toward him. He was angry that he never cared for him while in prison, and even angrier that he had replaced him as successor with Ryuji. Despite his anger towards his father, Ryuga still wanted to make him proud and restore his status as the heir to the company. After being treated in the hospital, Shigeru finally went home. With his life coming to an end, he began to feel remorse for his past actions, and realized that to build and develop Nagaya, he had done many heinous things to eliminate his competitors. He was also saddened that he still hadn't found a suitable successor for Nagaya. Amid his sadness, Shigeru receives a phone call from Arata, who tells him not to die too soon. Arata said he still had unfinished business with him, and he won't let him die before he suffered. To Shigeru's surprise, this phone call reignites a spark in him, and he realizes that only Arata can make him feel challenged. Declaring war on Shigeru, Arata begins to carefully plan his move. And Aoi gets closer to him. Now Arata sees Aoi as a mature woman, which makes her extremely happy and even more motivated to help him carry out his revenge plan. She even agrees to infiltrate their enemy when he asks her to. Shigeru was looking for a new director at Nagaya Holdings. Arata sees this as an opportunity and asks Aoi to run for the company's director position, hoping that this would allow her to destroy Nagaya from inside and remove him from the chairman position. But unfortunately for them, Aoi falls ill on the day of the election, resulting in her being hospitalized. In the end, her competitor gets more votes on the ballot. After learning about her defeat in the director election, Aoi intends to return to work at Roppongi Class, even though her condition is still recovering. However, Arata refuses to let her return to work before she is fully recovered. Interpreting Arata's concern for Aoi as a form of affection, Ryuta realizes that Arata likes Aoi but is hesitant to be honest with his feelings. He advises him to confess his feelings to her. Only after receiving Ryuta's advice, he finally realizes that Aoi has always accompanied and supported him sincerely, always trying to make him happy, but he has never returned her kindness. To repay for her support, he buys her the necklace she wants. Meanwhile, Ryuga visits a Yakuza office and asks the boss to kill Arata. He hates him and is willing to pay a high price for the job. To make the job easier, he tells them they can lure Arata by kidnapping Aoi. Soon after, the Yakuza goes to Aoi's hospital room, just as she opens the necklace box Arata gave her. Arata and Ryuji were shocked to discover that their Aoi was missing from her room. But it didn't take long for them to uncover the truth. It turned out that Ryuga had kidnapped Aoi and was holding her captive. In a ruthless email, he ordered Arata to come alone to a designated location if he wanted her to live. Without hesitation, Arata set out for the location, not realizing that Ryuji was trailing behind him. Ryuji, unable to keep his composure, panicked and ran wildly, drawing the attention of the Yakuza boss, who fired his gun. Without hesitation, he threw himself in front of Ryuji, taking the bullet and getting injured. In a state of panic, Ryuji managed to call for an ambulance before he was caught by the Yakuza. The news of Arata's shooting quickly spread throughout Japan, and he was rushed to the hospital for surgery. As Arata lay unconscious, Ryuta stole a memory card from the CCTV in the Yakuza office. He knew all too well about the Yakuza's involvement in Arata's shooting and the role that Ryuga had played in it. With the memory card in hand, he approached Yuka, asked her to give it to Shigeru, and explained to her the contents of the memory card, which contained a video of Ryuga ordering the Yakuza to kill Arata. Sure enough, when Shigeru viewed the video, he saw his son, Ryuga, in the Yakuza office, asking them to kill Arata. Seeing that, Yuka was horrified and furious, and blamed him for Ryuga's descent into criminality. She could no longer work for him and submitted her resignation letter, vowing to expose the corrupt practices of Nagaya Holdings to the public, including tax evasion, slush funds, collusion, and bribery. A few days later, Arata finally woke up and was determined to save Aoi, despite Yuka's attempts to stop him. He realized he loved her and would not let anything bad happen to her. Determined to save Aoi, Arata approached Shigeru and demanded to know Ryuga's location. He was willing to do whatever it took, even if it meant bowing down to Shigeru, something he had never done before. But this was not a sign of defeat for Arata. He was simply desperate to save Aoi, and Shigeru knew that. Reluctantly, he revealed Ryuga's location to him. Meanwhile, Aoi and Ryuji tried to escape their captors, but Ryuga and the Yakuza were hot on their trail. Just in time, Arata arrived to save them. With Aoi safe, he finally confessed his feelings to her, and she embraced him. But their troubles were far from over, as Ryuga was still after them. He knew that the only way to keep Aoi safe was to confront him, so he told her to go first while he stayed behind to face Ryuga in a fierce battle. In the end, Arata emerged victorious. Sometime later, the police, led by Matsushita, arrived at the scene to arrest Ryuga and the Yakuza. Following a report from Yuka, the police also conducted a raid on Nagaya Holdings' office, marking the beginning of Shigeru's downfall. In despair, he watches as his once thriving company collapses and is later bought out by Arata. Feeling defeated and with nothing left, Shigeru sought out Arata at one of his restaurants. Begging him not to take over Nagaya Holdings, he was willing to bow down to him. But Arata refused, explaining that the business world can be merciless. As the series came to a close, they discussed their plans. Yuka planned to open her restaurant with Arata's help and guidance as a friend. Then Ryuji said goodbye to Aoi as he headed to the United States to work, and she forgave him for his past mistakes. As for Arata and Aoi, their relationship blossomed as they decided to start dating after he confessed his feelings for her. The moral lesson of this series is, taking revenge can be satisfying, but it's not always the best course of action. It can lead to negative consequences and cause more harm than good. It's important to consider the long-term effects of one's actions and strive for justice and closure peacefully. It also teaches us